Stand up. Now. You're being detained. I asked for ID.
This is a public park. I haven't broken any law. You have no cause.
Don't lecture me. I decide what's suspicious out here.
And that right there is the problem, officer.
Last warning. ID or cuffs.
Officer Kyle Brutin had been patrolling the manicured streets of Oak Hollow for just under 5 years when he made the decision that would implode his career and cost the taxpayers of the city $6.4 million. At 29 years old, Brutin was known in the precinct house as an officer who generated statistics. He was aggressive, proactive, and notoriously rigid, a man who viewed the gray areas of life through a stark black and white lens. He believed his intuition was a finely tuned instrument capable of detecting criminality before a statute was even violated. He was young enough to be energetic, but arrogant enough to believe he had seen it all. On a sun-drenched Sunday afternoon in October, whilst patrolling the perimeter of the city's most prestigious green space, he received a dispatch call regarding suspicious individuals, potentially consuming alcohol and loitering in Elmwood Park. The suspicious individuals in question were Judge Eleanor Vance and her husband, Dr. Marcus Vance. Eleanor, a 54-year-old United States magistrate judge, had spent the last 2 decades on the federal bench presiding over complex litigation, signing search warrants for federal agencies, and earning a reputation for absolute fairness and intellectual rigor. Her husband Marcus was a 56-year-old thoracic surgeon who had saved more lives in the county hospital than Officer Brutin had written traffic tickets. They were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary with a quiet, alcohol-free picnic near the duck pond. They were dressed in what one might call Sunday casual. Eleanor in a tailored linen dress and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her eyes from the glare, Marcus in pressed khakis and a polo shirt. They looked like the epitome of the American dream, a couple enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of hard labor and public service. But Officer Brutin, cruising past the park entrance in his Interceptor, didn't see a federal judge and a surgeon. He didn't see 30 years of marriage or 2 pillars of the community. When he looked through his windshield, filtering the world through his own unexamined biases and the vague description from dispatch, he saw 2 black people in a neighborhood where the median home price hovered around $2 million. He saw outsiders, and in Kyle Brutin's mind, outsiders were a threat to the order he was sworn to maintain. Before we proceed, take a moment to tell us where you are watching from. Stories like this, stories of authority unchecked and dignity under siege, are happening in communities all across the nation. If you believe in holding power accountable, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us continue to investigate and narrate the truth. Elmwood Park is the crown jewel of the Oak Hollow district. It is a sprawling expanse of manicured lawns, weeping willows, and winding walking paths that serve the city's elite. It is the kind of place where silence is cherished, where residents walk purebred dogs on long leashes, and where the appearance of propriety is valued above all else. It was 1:15 p.m. The sun was high, casting long shadows through the autumn leaves. The park was sparsely populated, dotted with a few joggers and a group of college students tossing a frisbee near the bandstand. The Vances had chosen a secluded spot near the water, spreading a checkered blanket and unpacking a modest lunch of artisanal sandwiches and sparkling water. Eleanor Vance had just finished a grueling week. She had been reviewing detention motions for a multi-defendant conspiracy case and needed the fresh air to clear her head. She was a woman of immense composure, known in the courtroom for a demeanor that was unshakable. She did not raise her voice because she did not have to. Her authority was inherent, codified by the United States government, and earned through years of practice. Sitting there with Marcus, holding his hand, she felt a rare moment of peace. She had left her federal credentials in her tote bag, tucked safely beside the sparkling water. She carried them out of habit, a requirement of her position, though she rarely expected to need them on a Sunday picnic. But the peace was an illusion. The machinery of the Vance's ordeal had already been set in motion by a single phone call. Watching them from the second-story window of a Victorian home bordering the park was Patricia Ellsworth. Patricia, a 48-year-old interior designer, viewed Elmwood Park not as a public space, but as an extension of her own front lawn. She was the president of the local neighborhood association, a position she wielded with the fervor of a feudal lord. She prided herself on knowing every face in the neighborhood, every car that belonged in a driveway, and every schedule of the sanitation department. And on this Sunday, looking out her window, she saw something that disrupted her carefully curated view of the world. She saw the Vances. It didn't matter that they were sitting quietly. It didn't matter that they were dressed impeccably. Patricia Ellsworth saw two black adults sitting on the grass eating and decided they didn't fit the aesthetic of Elmwood Park. She watched them for 10 minutes, her suspicion fermenting into agitation. They had been there too long. They were loitering. Was that a wine bottle? It looked like glass. Alcohol was prohibited in the park without a permit. In her mind, she wasn't being prejudiced. She was protecting property values. She was maintaining standards. She picked up her phone and dialed the non-emergency line, her voice trembling with self-righteous indignation. "Yes, this is Patricia Ellsworth on Elmwood Drive. I need a patrol car sent to the park immediately. There are some people here who don't belong. They've been loitering near the pond for an hour, and I believe they're drinking alcohol. They look suspicious, like they're casing the houses nearby. It's making the neighbors very uncomfortable." The dispatcher, familiar with Patricia's frequent calls, asked the standard questions. "Are they causing a disturbance, ma'am? Are they threatening anyone?" "They are disturbing the peace by being there," Patricia snapped. "We have families here. Just send someone to check them out. I don't want to wait until they break into a home." The call was logged. The dispatched code was a low-priority check for a suspicious person welfare check. But when Officer Kyle Brutin saw the address and the nature of the complaint, his interest piqued. He had a history with this specific type of call. In his 5 years on the force, Brutin had accumulated a personnel file that was thick with citizen contacts that bordered on harassment. He had received 14 formal complaints. Most were for discourtesy or bias-based policing. He had a reputation for stopping luxury vehicles driven by minorities to check for warrants. He had once detained a Hispanic real estate agent for showing a house convinced the man was burglarizing the property. Each time, Brutin had escaped with a slap on the wrist. His union representative was skilled and the department's internal oversight was lax. His supervisors noted he was zealous and proactive, euphemisms that allowed his behavior to fester. Brutin believed he was the thin blue line protecting civilization from chaos. When he heard suspicious persons in Elmwood Park, he didn't hear a vague complaint from a busybody. He heard a call to action. He checked his mirror, adjusted his sunglasses, and accelerated toward the park. He was going to clean up the neighborhood. Do you think habitual callers like Patricia should face fines for weaponizing the police against their neighbors? Let us know in the comments below. Officer Brutin pulled his cruiser up to the curb on the south side of Elmwood Park at 1:28 p.m. He didn't park in the designated lot. Instead, he pulled 2 wheels up onto the grass verge, a small but significant display of dominance. He wanted his presence to be felt immediately. He stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his duty belt. He was a large man, physically imposing, with a buzz cut, and a posture that suggested he was constantly bracing for a fight. He scanned the park, his eyes passing over the group of 4 white college students near the bandstand. They were loud, tossing a frisbee that narrowly missed a passing stroller, and they were openly drinking beer from red Solo cups, a clear violation of the park's open container policy. Brutin ignored them. They didn't trigger his internal alarm system. They looked like kids just having fun. His gaze continued to sweep until it landed on the Vances. They were quiet. They were still. They were isolated near the pond. In Brutin's mind, their stillness was suspicious. Why weren't they moving? What were they waiting for? He began to walk across the grass, his stride purposeful and aggressive. He bypassed the path, cutting a straight line toward their picnic blanket. Dr. Marcus Vance was the first to notice the officer approaching. He had spent 30 years in emergency medicine. He knew how to read body language. He saw the tension in the officer's shoulders, the hand resting near the holster, the fixed stare. He felt a familiar knot of dread in his stomach, the talk he had given his nephews, the fear he had suppressed for decades. He placed a calming hand on Eleanor's arm. "Ellie," he said softly, "don't make any sudden moves. We have company." Judge Eleanor Vance looked up from her sandwich, shielding her eyes against the sun. She saw Officer Brutin looming over them, blocking out the light. She didn't feel fear. She felt a flash of irritation. She was a woman who commanded federal marshals. She was used to being the authority in the room, not the subject of scrutiny. "Can we help you, officer?" Eleanor asked. Her voice was calm, cultivated in the halls of justice. It was the voice she used when overruling an objection, firm, polite, and final. Brutin didn't like the tone. He interpreted her confidence as arrogance. "We've had reports of loitering and alcohol consumption in the park." Brutin announced, his voice carrying across the quiet lawn. "I need to see some identification. Both of you." Marcus sat up straighter. "Officer, we are eating lunch. This is sparkling water." He gestured to the green bottle. "And we are certainly not loitering. We are enjoying the park like everyone else." "I didn't ask for your life story." Brutin snapped, stepping closer, his shadow falling across their food. "I asked for ID, and I need to see a permit for this assembly." "A permit?" Eleanor frowned, genuinely confused. "Officer, a permit is required for groups larger than 20. We are two people having a picnic, and under the Fourth Amendment, unless you have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed, you have no grounds to demand our identification." Brutin's face flushed. He wasn't used to people citing the Constitution back to him, certainly not people who looked like the Vances. In his experience, people who knew the law were jailhouse lawyers or agitators. "Don't quote the law to me, lady. I am the law out here. You're trespassing in a residents-only zone." "This is a public park," Marcus said, his voice tightening. "Taxpayer-funded, open to all. Not for people who are disturbing the peace." Brutin countered, shifting his stance, blading his body as if preparing for a physical confrontation. "Now you can either produce ID so I can run you for warrants, or you can pack up and leave. Right now." Eleanor Vance took a deep breath. She had seen this behavior in defendants and angry litigants, but rarely in officers of the law, at least not this brazenly. She realized quickly that this man was not looking for the truth. He was looking for submission. And she knew that for a man like Brutin, a black woman asserting her rights was the ultimate act of rebellion. "Officer," Eleanor said, keeping her hands visible on her lap. "My name is Eleanor Vance. This is my husband, Dr. Marcus Vance. We live 3 miles from here on Highland Avenue. We have done nothing wrong. We are not leaving, and we are not showing you ID for a consensual encounter. You are harassing us." "Harassing you?" Brutin let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Okay, have it your way." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch show me with 2 uncooperative subjects at Elmwood, requesting backup." The escalation was manufactured entirely by Brutin. He had turned a lunch into a standoff. He looked down at Eleanor, his eyes cold. "Last chance. ID or cuffs. D or your choice." Judge Vance looked at her husband. She saw the fear in Marcus's eyes, not for himself, but for her. She knew that if she continued to refuse on principle, this man would put his hands on her. And while she was willing to fight in court, she did not want her husband to be assaulted in a park. She decided to end it the only way that might penetrate Brutin's thick veil of bias. She reached for her tote bag. "I am going to reach into my bag," she narrated slowly, treating him like a dangerous animal. "I am going to show you who I am. And then you are going to apologize and walk away." "Watch your hands," Brutin barked, hand dropping to his taser. Eleanor moved with deliberate slowness. She opened the leather bag and withdrew a sleek black leather wallet. It was not a standard wallet. It was a credentials case embossed with the gold seal of the United States Department of Justice. She flipped it open. Inside was a heavy gold badge and a photo ID card that read, United States Magistrate Judge, Eleanor J. Vance, Southern District. She held it up high enough for him to see the seal, the eagle, and the bold text. I am a federal judge, Eleanor said, her voice turning to steel. You are interfering with a member of the federal judiciary. Now stand down. Brutin looked at the badge. He saw the gold. He saw the seal. But his brain, rewired by years of confirmation bias and unchecked ego, refused to process the information. A black woman in a park with a federal judge's badge. Impossible. It had to be a prop, a fake, something she bought online to get out of tickets. He had heard of sovereign citizens carrying fake diplomatic immunity cards. This was just another version of that scam. You think I'm stupid? Brutin sneered. You think I haven't seen a fake badge before anyone can print that garbage at Kinko's? It is a federal crime to impersonate a judge, Eleanor warned, her hand trembling slightly with rage. And it is a federal crime to deprive a citizen of their civil rights under color of law. Officer, look at the hologram. Look at the ID number. Call your watch commander. I don't need to call anyone to know a fraud when I see one. Brutin spat. Impersonating an officer is a felony. Now you're really in trouble. It is real, Marcus shouted, standing up now. She is a judge. Are you insane? Read the badge. Sit down, Brutin yelled at Marcus, pointing a finger in his face. Back up or you're going down too. He turned his attention back to Eleanor. He didn't see a magistrate. He saw a liar. He saw someone trying to trick him. And that made him angrier than anything else. Stand up, he ordered Eleanor. You're under arrest. For what? Eleanor demanded, remaining seated. For eating lunch, for showing you my credentials. For disorderly conduct, failure to obey, and possession of forged government documents. Brutin recited the charges flowing easily from his tongue. Now get up or I will drag you up. The park had gone silent. The college students near the bandstand had stopped drinking. They were watching. 2 of them had pulled out their phones. A jogger had stopped on the path. The audience was growing. Officer, you are making a mistake that you will pay for the rest of your life, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I am asking you one last time to look at the credentials. I'm done looking, Brutin said. He lunged forward. He grabbed Eleanor Vance by the upper arm. His grip was bruising, unnecessary. He yanked the 54-year-old woman from the ground, spinning her around with a force that nearly knocked the wind out of her. Her hat fell into the grass. Her tote bag tipped over, spilling the sparkling water. Hey, get your hands off her, Marcus screamed, stepping forward. Stay back, Brutin roared, whipping his taser out with his free hand and pointing it at the surgeon. Take one more step and you ride the lightning. Stay back. Marcus froze. He looked at his wife. She locked eyes with him. Do not engage her eyes, said. Do not give him a reason to kill you. She nodded slightly. Document this. Brutin holstered the taser and grabbed Eleanor's other wrist. He wrenched her arms behind her back, cranking them upward in a pain compliance hold that was typically reserved for violent felons. Eleanor winced, a sharp pain shooting through her shoulder, but she did not cry out. She would not give him the satisfaction. You are hurting me, she stated clearly for the benefit of the cameras she could see recording in the distance. I am not resisting. You are using excessive force. Stop resisting, Brutin shouted, performing for the cameras he pretended to ignore. He slapped the cuffs onto her wrists, ratcheting them down tight, too tight. The metal bit into the soft skin of her wrists. I am compliant, Eleanor said. I am a United States Magistrate judge. This officer is arresting me unlawfully. Tell it to the judge, Brutin muttered, oblivious to the irony. He shoved her forward, marching her across the grass toward his patrol car. Eleanor stumbled but regained her footing, walking with her head held high despite the dirt on her dress and the handcuffs binding her. Marcus was already on his phone. He wasn't calling 911. He was calling the chief of police, a man he had met at a charity gala 3 months prior. But the voicemail picked up. Marcus cursed, hung up, and started filming with his own phone, narrating the scene, his voice shaking with fury. "This is Officer." He zoomed in on the nameplate as Brutin shoved Eleanor into the back seat. "Brutin, arresting Judge Eleanor Vance. We are in Elmwood Park. It is 1:40 p.m. Brutin slammed the door on the judge. He walked around to the driver's side, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He felt powerful. He had taken control. He had cleaned up the park. He didn't care about the cameras. Let them film. He would write the report. He would control the narrative. He keyed the ignition. "You're making a big mistake, pal," one of the college students yelled from the bandstand. Brutin ignored him, peeling away from the curb, his tires tearing up a strip of the meticulously kept lawn. The ride to the 4th Precinct took 15 minutes. They were the longest 15 minutes of Officer Kyle Brutin's life, though he didn't know it yet. In the back seat, Eleanor Vance sat in silence. She was cataloging everything. The smell of stale coffee in the car, the speed at which he was driving, the way he kept checking her in the rearview mirror, looking for fear, looking for tears. He found neither. He found a pair of eyes that were analyzing him, dissecting him, dismantling him. Eleanor was not just angry, she was calculating. She was mentally drafting the civil rights complaint. 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. Deprivation of rights, false arrest, excessive force, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was thinking about qualified immunity and how to pierce it. She was thinking about the consent decree she would force upon this department. They arrived at the precinct. Brutin parked and hauled her out of the car. He marched her through the back entrance past the holding cells and into the booking area. It was a busy Sunday shift. Officers were typing reports, sipping coffee. The atmosphere was casual until Brutin walked in with a well-dressed, middle-aged black woman in handcuffs. The watch commander on duty was Lieutenant Frank Miller. Miller was 58, a 30-year veteran who was counting the days to retirement. He was sitting at the raised desk reviewing a shift log when he heard the commotion. He looked up, his eyes locked onto the woman in handcuffs. He blinked. He squinted. Then the blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. He knew that face. He had testified in her courtroom 3 weeks ago on a federal drug task force case. He had stood when the bailiff cried, "All rise." He had addressed her as Your Honor. Miller stood up, knocking his chair over. "Brutin," he bellowed, his voice cracking with panic. "What the hell are you doing?" Brutin looked confused. He puffed his chest out. "Trespassing and disorderly at Elmwood. Also possession of a forged federal ID. She claims she's a judge." Brutin tossed the credentials onto the high desk. "Fake badge. Good quality, though." Lieutenant Miller looked at the credentials. He didn't need to pick them up. He looked at Eleanor Vance. She was standing straight, her wrists crossed behind her back, her eyes burning a hole through him. "Lieutenant Miller," Eleanor said, her voice echoing in the silent booking room. "It is good to see you again. I believe the last time we spoke you were requesting a warrant for a wiretap." Miller vaulted over the desk. He didn't walk. He ran. He pushed Brutin aside with a force that sent the younger officer stumbling into a filing cabinet. "Get the keys," Miller hissed at Brutin. "Get the keys right now." "Sarge, she's a suspect," Brutin started. "She is a federal magistrate judge, you moron." Miller screamed, his face turning purple. "Give me the keys." Brutin froze. The room spun. The other officers had stopped what they were doing. They were staring. The reality began to crash down on Brutin like a collapsing building. Magistrate Judge Reel Miller snatched the key ring from Brutin's belt. He spun Eleanor around and unlocked the cuffs with trembling hands. As soon as the metal clicked open, Eleanor brought her hands forward, rubbing the deep red grooves on her wrists. "Your Honor," Miller stammered, I don't... On behalf of this department, I'm so sorry. There are no words." Eleanor didn't look at Miller. She looked at Brutin. The young officer was backed against the filing cabinet, his face pale, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a child who had broken a priceless vase. "Officer Brutin," Eleanor said softly, "you refused to verify my identity. You refused to listen to reason. You assaulted me. You kidnapped me. And you did it because you could not conceive of a world where a black woman sits on the federal bench." She turned to Miller. "I want his badge. I want his gun. And I want him removed from this building immediately. And Lieutenant, I want the Chief of Police here in 10 minutes. "Yes, Your Honor. Immediately, Your Honor." Miller turned to Brutin. "Gun and badge, now. You're suspended. Get out of my sight." Brutin unholstered his weapon. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He placed his badge on the desk next to the credentials he had called fake. He looked at Eleanor, wanting to say something, an apology, an excuse, anything, but the look she gave him froze the words in his throat. He had ceased to exist to her as a person. He was now just a defendant. Why do some officers double down when challenged instead of investigating? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. The fallout was nuclear. Within 2 hours, the video shot by the college students had hit Twitter and TikTok. It showed Brutin yanking a seated woman from the ground. It showed Marcus screaming that she was a judge. It showed the arrogance, the cruelty. The video shot by Marcus Vance surfaced an hour later, providing the close-up commentary. The headlines were devastating: Oak Hallow officer arrests federal judge for picnicking. Fake badge police officer ignores federal credentials. Magistrate judge handcuffed in Elmwood Park. The FBI issued a statement that evening, a rare move for the Bureau. The Federal Bureau of Investigation condemns the unlawful detainment of Magistrate Judge Eleanor Vance. An attack on the judiciary is an attack on the rule of law. We are opening an immediate civil rights investigation. The Oak Hallow Police Department was under siege. Protesters gathered outside the precinct. The mayor, the city manager, and the chief of police held a press conference at 8:00 p.m. They looked like men attending a funeral. They apologized. They promised transparency. But the public wasn't interested in promises. Patricia Ellsworth, the caller, was identified by internet sleuths within 24 hours. Her 911 call was released via a Freedom of Information Act request. The audio of her complaining about suspicious people who didn't belong played on national news loops. Her interior design business was flooded with negative reviews. Her social media accounts were deleted. She issued a tearful apology claiming she was just concerned about the neighborhood. But the damage was done. She became a pariah in the very community she tried to gatekeep. The lawsuit filed by Eleanor and Marcus Vance was a masterclass in legal drafting. It didn't just target Brutin, it targeted the system that created him. It cited his 14 prior complaints. It cited the failure of supervision. It cited the culture of the department that encouraged officers to treat citizens as combatants. During the discovery phase, Eleanor's lawyers, some of the best civil rights litigators in the country, uncovered emails from Brutin to other officers using racial slurs. They found Bodycam footage of other stops where he had harassed minorities. They built a case that was not just about one bad afternoon, but about a rotten institution. The city of Oak Hallow didn't dare go to trial. They knew a jury would destroy them. They settled for $4 million. It was the largest police misconduct payout in the city's history. Kyle Brutin was fired 5 weeks after the incident. His arbitration hearing was short. The union didn't even fight for him. The video was indefensible. He was decertified by the State Police Commission, meaning he could never work in law enforcement again. At 29, his career was over. He was last reported working construction in a neighboring state, his name permanently attached to one of the most embarrassing police failures of the decade. But money and firings do not erase memory. 6 months later, Eleanor Vance returned to the bench. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, lawyers, citizens. She took her seat looking out over the gallery. She looked the same, dignified, composed, but those close to her knew the toll it had taken. The sleepless nights, the phantom sensation of handcuffs on her wrists, the realization that her robe was the only thing that protected her, and without it, she was just another target. She addressed the court before calling the first case. "We like to believe," Judge Vance said, her voice steady, "that the law is a shield. That if we follow the rules, if we achieve, if we contribute, we are safe. But I learned in Elmwood Park that for some of us, our very existence is seen as a violation of the rules. Officer Brutin did not arrest me because of what I did. He arrested me because of who he thought I was. He saw my skin and he stopped seeing the law." She paused, looking directly at the camera in the back of the room. "We cannot build a just society if the guardians of that society are blinded by bias. Justice is not blind. It sees everything, and it remembers." The courtroom remained silent long after she finished. This story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Judge Vance had the power, the knowledge, and the resources to fight back. She had the badge. But what if she had been a nurse, a teacher, a cashier? What if she hadn't known the law? How many people are sitting in cells right now because an officer like Kyle Brutin decided they didn't belong, and they didn't have the power to prove him wrong? The settlement cost the city millions, but the cost to public trust is incalculable. It reminds us that titles and accolades are no armor against prejudice. It reminds us that the work of justice is never finished, not even for a judge. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please share it. We need to keep these conversations alive. And before you go, ask yourself, if you saw something like this happening in your local park, would you have stopped to film? Would you have intervened? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and thanks for watching.